Maybe you still remember the sound of his paws walking around the house. It wasn't tall. It didn't attract anyone's attention. But you knew exactly when it was him. Sometimes it came from the hallway. Sometimes he stopped near his bedroom door. And without you realizing it, that sound became part of your life. Now, what hurts the most? It is the silence that took its place. The house is still the same. The furniture is in the same place. But something is just not there anymore. Or is it? Because there are moments where it feels like you heard it again. A light step, an almost imperceptible noise, that feeling that you are not alone. And you stop, look around, try to understand. But there is no one. Or at least, that's what it seems like. If you've ever lost a dog, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The house changes. The weather changes. Even the way you walk through rooms changes. Because before, there was always someone following you, even in silence. Now tell me something. Have you ever felt like he was still there, even after you have left? Not as a souvenir, but as a presence? This video is about that. About things that almost no one talks about signs that many people feel, but ignore it, and mainly, about something that can completely change the way you view loss. Because maybe your dog hasn't gone away the way you thought. Maybe you just, I didn't notice how he came back. And before you think this is just imagination, stay with me until the end, because you will start to remember things that didn't make sense before. Small details, strange moments, sensations you let go. And when everything connects, you might notice something that changes everything. May the bond between you. Perhaps it was never stopped. But to understand this, we need to start with something simple. Things you felt and pretended he didn't feel it. And that's exactly where that everything starts to change. There are things that happen, and you simply choose not to pay attention. Not because they are not important, but because they are difficult to explain. Like that moment when you're alone at home and feels like it's not there. There is no loud noise, there's nothing visible, but there's something there. A light presence, almost familiar, as if someone was passing by without making a point of being seen. Maybe this has already happened to you. You're walking around the house, distracted, and for a second, it feels clear that someone is coming after, exactly as before. That habit he had, of following you until you didn't even notice. From the bedroom to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the living room, always silent, but always close. And even after he left, this pattern has not completely disappeared. Or else, that automatic reflex. You drop something on the floor, and for a moment, wait for him to appear running, as he always did. But no one comes. But the strangest thing is that for a second, you truly believed he would come. And there's also that place in the house. You know which one it is. The corner where he slept, where he was quiet, observing everything. Sometimes you pass by and slows down without realizing it, as if he was still respecting that space, as if it were still his. And here's something that a lot of people feel, but almost no one says. There are days when it seems like he is more present than others. No logical reason, no explanation, but you feel it, stronger, closer, and you try to rationalize. It's just nostalgia. It's just custom. It's just the mind trying to fill the void. But deep down, it doesn't just seem like that. Because it's not just remembering, it's feeling. And anyone who has been through this knows the difference. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever pretended you didn't feel it? Why would it be easier to believe it wasn't real? Many people do this. Ignore it. Walk away. Silence. Why accept? It would open up a frightening possibility. But by ignoring these moments, you might also be ignoring something important, something that doesn't come from your mind, but the connection that still exists. And if these little signs, aren't they just memory? What if they are attempts? Because when a bond is truly strong, it doesn't just disappear. He finds other ways, more subtle, quieter, but still present. And the most impressive thing is that this doesn't just happen to you. There are stories of people who began to notice things even clearer after they stopped ignoring. Things that could no longer be explained as a coincidence. And one of those stories, it will make you look at all of this in a different way, because it was exactly there that someone realized that maybe the dog had never left. After he was gone, it wasn't just silence that remained. It was a strange feeling that the house still holds something, as if, somehow, she still breathed him. You enter a room, and for a second, it feels like nothing has changed. Not visually, but in the feeling. The air feels too familiar, the environment, loaded with presence. There are places that are different, and you know exactly what they are. That corner where he slept, the place where he lay while you did something, without asking for anything, just staying there. Sometimes you look into this space, and it doesn't feel empty. It seems busy otherwise, as if there was something there, even if you can't see it. And there are days in which the house seems quieter than usual, a heavy silence, almost palpable. But in others, the opposite happens. You hear something light, a quick movement, a sound so subtle that you almost ignore it, but not completely, because he looks too familiar. It's as if the house has a memory, not just things, but his, of the paths he took, from the places where he stopped, of the moments when he simply existed there, with you. And that memory sometimes seems to repeat itself. Not the same, but close enough to make you stop, to make you feel. There is a specific moment that many people report, and maybe this has happened to you too. You are at home. Everything seems normal, and suddenly, you feel like someone has passed you by, fast, light, no touch, but with presence. You look, there's nobody, but the body reacts, because that doesn't seem like imagination. Stop for a second, breathe, remember a moment like that, because the more you try to forget, but it looks real. And the most curious thing is that those feelings don't come when you're thinking about him. They appear out of nowhere, in the middle of an ordinary day, doing something simple, living your routine. And that changes everything, because if it was just nostalgia, would come with the memory, but this comes before remembering. Maybe you've already felt this and ignored. Maybe you thought it was just an impression. But what if it wasn't? The house doesn't forget, and maybe some bonds don't either. And the more you start paying attention, but realize that these moments are not as random as they seem. They follow a pattern, a rhythm, almost as if were attempts. And it was precisely by paying attention to these small details that a person noticed something impossible to ignore, something that started subtle, like everything you felt, but then it was too clear to be a coincidence. And this story, it can completely change how you interpret all of this. It has a story which starts exactly like yours, without anything supernatural, nothing exaggerated, just silence and longing. One person commented something simple. After he left, the house never looked the same. Nothing different from what you've already felt. But what comes next? It's what changes everything. She said that in the first few days, the emptiness was unbearable. The place where he slept was still there, the bowl in the same corner, and the habit of looking at the door still existed, even though I knew he wouldn't come back. But a few weeks later, things started to happen, small, almost imperceptible. First, she began to feel like she was being followed around the house, not all the time, but at specific moments, especially when I was distracted, as if someone was repeating an old habit. She ignored it. She told herself it was just nostalgia. Until one day, she dropped a piece of food on the floor and automatically waited, that reflection you know. But this time, it was different because she listened. A light sound, fast, coming exactly from the direction where he used to be. She froze, not out of fear, but of recognition. Now pay attention to this, because this is where everything changed. She didn't run. He didn't try to explain. She just stayed silent, feeling. And for the first time, instead of pushing away that feeling, she allowed it. In the following days, the signs began to become clearer, not visible, but consistent. The place where he slept seemed busy, not physically, but energetically. And there was a moment that she never forgot. She was sitting quietly, thinking about him, and without realizing it, he spoke in a low voice. "If you're still here, give me a sign." Nothing happened at the time. Silence. But a few minutes later, a light sound passed through the house, the same kind of sound that she heard every day before he left. She didn't see anything, but he felt everything. And it was at that moment that something inside her has changed, because it didn't feel like longing anymore. It felt like presence. And do you know the strongest? She wasn't the only one. Other people started responding to that comment, telling similar things, same standards, same sensations, same little signs. As if was not an isolated case. And this raises something difficult to ignore. How many people are feeling this, but prefer not to accept? Why accept changes everything. And maybe the most uncomfortable thing is not the doubt, but the possibility of it being real. Because if it is, so maybe he never will away. And it's exactly here, which begins the biggest conflict of all. There's a moment where you start to realize that you can no longer ignore it, not because it became more obvious, but because it became too frequent. You try to remain normal, follow your routine, pretend you don't understand, but those little signs continue to happen. And then the conflict begins, not outside, in here. On the one hand, the logic, saying it's just memory, just longing, just the brain trying to deal with the absence. On the other, something quieter, deeper. That doesn't try to explain, just feel. And the more you try to rationalize, the stranger it gets, because it doesn't fit. Memory doesn't make you turn away quickly, as if someone had passed by. Memory doesn't create that clear feeling that there is someone there, watching you in silence. Memory does not repeat patterns with the same presence as before. So what is it? Take a second and think about it calmly. How many times have you felt something and immediately tried to delete it? Why feel opened a door and maybe you weren't ready to cross? But here's the point that almost no one talks about. Ignoring doesn't make it disappear. It just makes you stop noticing. And if these moments keep happening, maybe it's not because you haven't gotten over it. Maybe it's because the connection is not over. This bothers you because it completely changes the way you understand loss. We were taught to believe that when someone goes, it's over, end, silence, total absence. But what if with them, it's not like that? And here comes something that might stick with you. Some bonds are so strong that they don't know how to end. Keep that, because maybe what do you call longing is In fact, a form of presence that you haven't yet learned to recognize. And this creates an inevitable conflict. Believe what you've always heard, or trust what you felt. And it's not a simple decision. Why trust it? It means accepting something greater, something you can't control. Don't even try it. Just live. But there is one important detail. When you stop resisting, the signs change. They become clearer, more aligned, almost as if there was a response from the other side. And it is at this point that many people begin to notice something surprising. They don't just remain. They find ways to come back. And when you understand how this happens, everything that seemed coincidental starts to make sense. Once you stop resisting, something changes. Not in the house, not on objects, but in the way you perceive it. The same places take on another meaning. That corner where he slept, it no longer just seems empty. It looks like a meeting place. And the signs begin to organize. They are no longer random. They appear at specific times, when you are most sensitive, quieter, more open, as if there was a harmony. Some people start to notice patterns, always at the same time, always in the same place, always in those moments when the heart tightens the most. And it's no coincidence, because when the bond is deep, it does not depend on the physical to continue existing. He adapts. And this is where a lot of people realize something simple, but transformer. They don't come back like before, but they come back as best they can. Pay attention to this, because it completely changes the way you interpret everything. Maybe he won't come running around the house, not even jumping on you like he used to do, but that doesn't mean absence. It means another form of presence. A light sound at the right time, a feeling of company when you need it most, that inexplicable impulse to look at a specific place. Small signs, but loaded with meaning. And the more you recognize, the more they happen. Not because they started now, but because you started to notice. There is something that many people report after they go through this process. Difficult times, heavy days, phases in which everything seems to fall apart. And precisely in these moments, something happens. A sudden feeling of calm, a relief that has no logical explanation, as if someone was there. And maybe it is, because if there is something that defines this type of bond, it's loyalty. And loyalty, it does not end with physical absence, she continues. It transforms, adapts, but it continues. And that leads to a silent understanding that maybe he still knows exactly where you are, even if you don't see it, even if you don't understand. And when that idea stops seeming impossible and it starts to look familiar, something inside you changes. The pain doesn't go away, but it takes on another meaning. It's no longer just a loss, and it also starts to be connection. And it is at this point that everything goes back to the beginning, but in a different way. Because that memory, that sound, maybe it never left. Maybe everything goes back to that sound, that simple sound, pause, walking around the house. In the beginning, he was just part of the routine, almost invisible. But today, that's exactly the sound that's needed. Or, what do you think you do? Because if you stop now and remember calmly, maybe you notice something strange. It has not completely disappeared. He changed. Sometimes it comes like an echo, almost imperceptible. A light movement on the floor, a quick noise in the hallway, a feeling that someone has just passed by. And you stop, look, try to understand. But this time, maybe you won't ignore it. Because now, you know. Come back to that moment when you heard something and couldn't explain it. when he felt a presence and tried to rationalize, when he looked at that place in the house, and he was sure, for a second, that it was not empty. What if that moment, wasn't it imagination? What if it was exactly the opposite? If you've ever lost a dog, you know the bond was not common. It wasn't just company, it was connection, silent, constant, deep. And connections like that do not follow simple rules. They don't end just because time has passed, not even because the body is gone. They find ways, even if discreet, even if almost invisible, but still real. And maybe, what do you call longing? That is in part the way this presence continues to reach you. Not to arrest you, but to accompany you. Because he knew where you were before, and maybe still know. And that changes everything. The house is no longer just silence. Spaces are no longer just absence. They are living memory. Not the one that was left in the past, but the one that still happens, in small details. Now tell me, if he found a way to be close to you today, would you recognize it? Or would I let it go? How have you left so many times? If something similar has ever happened to you, account here, not in doubt, but as a felt truth. And if, deep down, you believe, even if a little, that this bond is not over, write that too. Because when you talk, others realize they are not alone. And perhaps this is exactly what many people are missing. Understand that you are not the only one who feels this. In the end, maybe it was never about loss, but about transformation. And that sound that one day was routine, today can be a silent reminder of something greater, that some bonds, they don't need physical presence to continue existing. And maybe, while you live your life, on some level that you still don't fully understand, he's still around, silent, loyal, as it always was. And if one day you hear that sound again, maybe it's not your mind. Maybe just be him, meeting you once again,